By the year 2045, humanity monitors every square meter of the Earth's surface in real time. We engineered our cities to integrate with the environment, tracking every weather pattern, ocean current, and tectonic shift with absolute precision. This technological mastery relied on a settled scientific consensus. Biologists and paleontologists agreed that the Earth's biological history was a completed record, meticulously chronicled through an exhaustive, digitized database of every known fossil. Zooming into the KPG sediment layer, the timeline shows a hard stop for all large reptilian biological markers, starved out by nuclear winter. But as this dissolves into our modern satellite grid, a discrepancy emerges. A persistent data void over the Pacific bounces back zero data. For decades, automated systems logged this as a minor routing error. No human operator considered that a massive geographic landmass could remain invisible to low-orbit scanning arrays for over half a century. Our reliance on absolute data created a false sense of omniscience. Because the orbital sensors read nothing, we assumed nothing was there, unaware that a massive biological secret remained hidden behind a localized meteorological curtain. Approaching the exact coordinates requires dropping out of the clear sky and directly into an impenetrable atmospheric anomaly. The aircraft's floodlights scatter against heavy, churning mist, cutting off all visual and radio contact with the outside world. Breaking through the canopy reveals an environment that defies modern biology. In this humid, darkly lit jungle, the scale of the flora dwarfs anything recorded in the modern era. Climatologists refer to this geographic isolation as a cryptic topography anomaly. It explains how hundreds of square miles of landmass managed to slip past sophisticated radar nets. This cross-section shows the underlying mechanics. Highly charged, interlocking magnetic fields push outward from the island bedrock. When satellite radar waves hit this interference, they deflect away from the island, feeding the orbital sensors a featureless reading that mimics open ocean water. The isolation is reinforced by a secondary thermal barrier. Below the surface, intense heat rises from deep geothermal vents. When that water collides with the freezing Pacific currents, it generates a permanent column of steam, locking the island under a perpetual cloud ceiling. The island survived through a precise combination of extreme magnetic interference and thermal dynamics. This naturally occurring fortress rendered an entire ecosystem invisible to 21st century surveillance. Moving into the interior, the environmental metrics shift. Ferns and mosses stretch dozens of feet into the air, fed by high concentrations of carbon dioxide and nutrient-dense volcanic soil. Looking up into the canopy, the team finds massive tree trunks sheared cleanly in half, 20 feet off the ground. The fracture patterns indicate immense, directed blunt force, too localized for a storm, and far too high for any known modern animal. Directly below the sheared trees, a three-toed footprint is pressed deep into the thick mud. It has flattened giant ferns and remains partially filled with seeping groundwater. This weight distribution chart maps the exact depth and shape of that track. By measuring the localized soil compaction, biomechanics can calculate the mass required to displace this much earth. The data points to a bipedal creature weighing over 8 metric tons. Atmospheric sensors pick up fresh, non-fossilized spores drifting through the humid air. These specific reproductive cells belong to plant species that vanished from the global record 66 million years ago. The depth of the track, the presence of these ancient spores, suggest this environment supports life on a scale that disappeared from the rest of Earth at the end of the Cretaceous. The thermal mist finally breaks. A towering silhouette shifts through the ancient timber, its massive frame moving with heavy, deliberate precision. For the researchers on the ground, the math and the tracks materialize into a breathing, 70-foot-long reality. They're standing in the presence of an apex predator that has existed since the age of the dinosaurs. This single visual confirmation invalidates 3 centuries of established paleontology. Every timeline charting the total collapse of massive reptilian life must now account for this survivor. The hierarchy of the planet shifted in an instant. This discovery places a multi-ton apex predator directly alongside humanity in the 21st century, challenging our total dominance over the biosphere. This discovery creates a massive ethical dilemma. A global society must now figure out how to interact with an ancient, lethal ecosystem without destroying the geographic isolation that kept it alive. The KPG boundary was a global catastrophe, but in this corner of the Pacific, the line between extinction and survival stayed blurred. In this jungle, the Cretaceous never ended. By the year 2045, we believed we had measured every inch of the Earth. Satellites and AI algorithms had mapped every mountain range, tracked every ocean current, and cataloged the globe with absolute mathematical precision. Paleontological science had moved into a state of archival maintenance. With the fossil record categorized and every continent scanned, the existence of a living prehistoric biosphere was considered a physical impossibility. But the telemetry systems began picking up something that the models couldn't explain. Deep in the Pacific Ocean, a persistent radar void appeared. It was a massive geographic blind spot that completely rejected modern satellite scans. Our total reliance on digital telemetry had created a vulnerability. Because the mapping algorithms couldn't read the anomaly, the systems simply ignored it, leaving us completely blind to a massive physical reality. The geographical coordinates of this void sit squarely in a convergence zone of extreme ocean currents. These converging forces generate a permanent, isolated atmospheric storm cell that never dissipates. Here, you can see how the high-pressure storm cell operates. The extreme density of moisture combined with heavy electromagnetic interference creates an impenetrable dome. It acts like a physical shield, completely scrambling the thermal imaging and optical sensors trying to pierce it. With remote sensing rendered useless, a covert scientific team was assembled. Their directive was blunt: fly directly into the interference and physically pierce the storm wall to gather manual data. When the most sophisticated technology on the planet failed, there was only one option left. We had to revert to boots-on-the-ground exploration to see what was actually hiding in the dark. The approach required punching through hurricane-force winds and crushing atmospheric pressure. The transport aircraft was battered by severe weather and near-zero visibility as it fought its way through the dense storm wall. Then, the violent turbulence simply stopped. The fog broke, revealing a sprawling, impossibly dense microcontinent completely insulated from the outside world. The transport touched down on the damp soil. It was the very first time modern humans had made physical contact with this isolated landmass. 3 scientists stepped out into the humid air. Their advanced 2045 tactical gear and scanning equipment suddenly looked incredibly fragile against the massive, towering scale of the primal jungle surrounding them. The team had crossed the Pacific, but stepping through that fog wall physically pushed them backward through millions of years of time. The enormous size of the flora here is governed by a biological mechanism called insular gigantism, a process where isolated species grow massive due to a lack of predators. Here, it operates within a perfectly sealed environmental loop. This chart compares prehistoric atmospheric oxygen against depleted 2045 levels. The storm dome trapped that ancient, hyperoxygenated air. This localized hyperoxygenation acts as a biological engine, allowing internal respiratory systems of organisms to support massive biological scaling without collapsing. This isolated environment did not hit a pause button. Shut off from the outside world, it continued a ruthless, unbroken chain of apex evolution over millions of years. Millions of years of uninterrupted apex evolution have turned this island into a highly active, lethal biological engine. The team's scanners remained silent, but the mud at their feet held the answer. A fresh, 3-toed reptilian track, pressed deep into the dark silt. The extreme soil displacement implies staggering biomechanics. To compress the mud to that depth requires immense tonnage, specifically concentrated through a highly focused bipedal weight distribution. By analyzing the deep impact ridges at the toe and the huge distance between successive tracks, the team could deduce the creature's massive stride. These metrics point directly to incredible speed and an indisputable classification as a hypercarnivore. The scientists had not stepped into a quiet sanctuary. They had unknowingly walked directly into an active hunting ground, immediately shifting their status from scientific observers to potential prey. The ambient noise of the jungle suddenly shifted. The overlapping calls of insects and smaller fauna went completely, abruptly silent. High above them, the ancient jungle canopy began to physically shift. The dense branches parted under an immense weight moving fluidly through the timber. For centuries, humanity rested safely at the top of the food chain, convinced nothing could challenge our dominance. That comfortable illusion vanished the moment the massive shadow fell over the expedition team. This discovery shatters the 2045 illusion of total planetary control. We are no longer the observers at the top of the hierarchy. We are intruders in an era that never ended, and where our survival is no longer guaranteed.